George Soros ganhou bilhões de dólares antecipando mudanças no mercado financeiro. Mega investidor já foi chamado do homem que quebrou o Banco da Inglaterra, acusado de ter provocado a crise financeira asiática em 97 e de ser corresponsável pelas chamadas revoluções coloridas na Geórgia e na Ucrânia. Hoje, Soros diz que seu objetivo é fazer um mundo melhor. Para entrevistar o empresário e investidor norte-americano George Soros, nós convidamos Guilherme Barros, editor da coluna Mercado Aberto do jornal Folha de São Paulo, Robinson Borges, editor do caderno Eu e Fim de Semana do jornal Valor Econômico, José Fux, editor de Economia e Negócios da revista Época, Sônia Raci, colunista do jornal O Estado de São Paulo, José Paulo Kupfer, chefe de redação do Departamento de Jornalismo da Rede Gazeta, Luiz Gonzaga Beluso, economista e professor da Unicamp e da Facamp, e Alastair Stewart, correspondente da agência Dow Jones Newswires, em São Paulo. Também temos a participação do cartunista Paulo Caruso, registrando com seus desenhos os momentos e os flagrantes do programa. O Roda Viva é transmitido em rede nacional de TV, pela rede pública, para todo o Brasil. Hoje, como o programa está sendo gravado, ele não permite a participação direta do telespectador, mas você pode mandar a sua pergunta, sua crítica, sua sugestão, sua observação pelo site do programa. O endereço está aí na tela, www.tvcultura.com.br/Roda Viva. Boa noite. Eu queria começar com o seguinte, o senhor, ao mesmo tempo em que tem uma forte participação filantrópica hoje em dia, continua fazendo os negócios. No caso do Brasil, o negócio do senhor é o etanol. Uma coisa tem a ver com a outra? Quer dizer, investir em etanol tem algum sentido filantrópico?
Well, I think I was attracted to it because it does contribute to controlling global warming, but it is based on a investment calculation and is not a philanthropic investment. I do my philanthropy in my foundation, and investing is something else. But this happens to be a personal investment that I'm making. It is not an investment that I'm making on behalf of the fund. So therefore, I'm more at liberty with my own money than I would be with my investors' money.
Supõe-se que uma pessoa que ganhou tanto dinheiro como o senhor deve ter algum tipo de faro para bons negócios. Em que medida o etanol brasileiro pode ser um bom negócio? E quais são os desafios para que se transforme efetivamente num bom negócio?
Well, there has to be a price put on carbon emissions because we must bring global warming under control. And that price or tax has to make ethanol more attractive than it is now. Ethanol is competitive up to a point with gasoline without this tax. So in the future, ethanol ought to be more attractive. Now, at the same time, you have tariffs imposed by the United States and Europe because ethanol is more efficient than ethanol made out of corn. I mean, sugar is more efficient. So to even it out and to give the domestic producers a chance, they've imposed taxes. And that means that for the time being, the main market for ethanol is a domestic market. Now, a lot of people, including me, are investing in ethanol with the expectation that it will be profitable to export to the United States, to Europe, to Japan, and to other parts of the world.
Eu gostaria de falar um pouquinho sobre mercado financeiro global. Hoje os mercados estão se movimentando ante o excesso de liquidez existente. Isso é uma anomalia, vamos dizer. Eu gostaria de saber o que o senhor prevê dessa anomalia, onde que ela vai dar? Há algum tempo, os economistas vêm dizendo que a economia americana vai entrar num processo de desaceleração. Essa desaceleração já começou ou não? E eu queria saber do senhor como prever hoje num mercado tão volátil e tão líquido? Como a gente pode fazer para ver, antecipar fatos que possam acontecer?
Well, you mentioned a slowdown of the American economy. That is in fact occurring because there has been a housing bubble which is now being deflated. There's an oversupply of houses. And the big question is, and I really don't know the answer, whether this is going to affect consumer demand. So far, it hasn't. So far, there have been other countervailing factors that have kept employment quite buoyant. But I think that there is something like a 50-50 chance that there will be more of a slowdown. And then you could have some rather unexpected negative results. Because in my view, the liquidity in the world comes from the American trade deficit, which builds up the reserves in various countries, and one way or another, those reserves create liquidity in world markets. So as long as that liquidity keeps on growing, the reserves keep on growing, the liquidity is being fed. If the economy slows down, then the rate at which it grows slows down, you could have some dislocations.
Mas, Mr. Soros, eu queria que o senhor contasse um pouquinho, enfim, todo mundo deve estar muito curioso, do que o senhor acha que pode acontecer e em que timing? Porque, por exemplo, há 6 meses atrás, o mercado financeiro internacional apostava numa redução de juros do Fed americano, agora já em junho e julho. Chegou agora mais perto dessa decisão, que vai acontecer agora em junho, o que aconteceu? Ninguém mais aposta nisso. Inclusive, estão prevendo uma estabilidade dos juros na economia americana por um prazo de quase médio prazo, daqui a 18 meses. Eu queria saber do senhor como se trabalha num mercado tão volátil de expectativas também. O que o senhor está vendo para o futuro? Esse processo de contaminação, da bolha contaminar a velocidade da economia americana, vai se dar quando? Eu acho que é essa a curiosidade de todo mundo. É o timing desse processo da desaceleração da economia americana.
Well, I would like to know as well. I think we would all like to know. Right now, housing prices have fallen. The prices of new homes have been cut quite sharply last month, and the builders actually moved quite a few of the houses. They actually sold a lot of the houses. But the inventory is still pretty high, so it depends on how long this process will last and whether it's going to affect the consumers. Now, in last year, for instance, because of the rapid appreciation in housing prices, there was $900 billion were actually withdrawn from the mortgages when the mortgages were refinanced with a larger size. And the estimates are that roughly half that amount eventually is spent. That's a very, very large amount. The entire deficit of the United States, the trade deficit, is less than that. It's about 700 billion. So it's a very large amount. Now, this mortgage equity withdrawal has now dropped to 300 billion. And it's going to drop to probably 100 billion. So I personally think that it is going to have more of an effect on consumer spending than we have seen so far. But in saying that, I know that my views are a little bit different from most other people who, on the other hand, see the tremendous growth in activity in the emerging markets, and the tremendous liquidity, and they expect a re-acceleration. You know, the future is always unknown, and that's nothing new.
Senhor Soros, isso tudo que o senhor fala é uma análise pontual da situação, especialmente da economia americana e dos seus déficits, mas parece que há uma anomalia mais estrutural, separando o mercado financeiro do mercado da economia real. Eu tenho uns dados do McKinsey Global Institute que mostram o seguinte: em 1980, o estoque de ativos financeiros equivalia à produção física mundial. Em 2003, já era 3 vezes a riqueza líquida. E em 2005 já é 3,5. E as previsões, as estimativas é que chegue a 4,5 vezes a produção mundial em 2010. Evidentemente que o mercado financeiro criou mecanismos derivativos, papéis, que cada vez mais estão descolados do que seriam os seus latos naturais, que é a produção econômica física. Isso não é uma patologia que vai nos levar a um Big Bang na área econômica? Mais do que a situação do soft landing ou não da própria economia americana? Isso não é patológico? O capitalismo não tem aqui uma patologia que não sabemos onde isso pode chegar?
No, actually, I think that there is a problem here, because we find newer and newer ways of financing activity. So credit is growing faster than the economy, and that is something that has been the trend and will probably continue to be the trend, but it cannot go to infinity. And so already in the United States, for instance, you can buy cars and houses with practically no equity investment. And you can borrow for 5 years when the cars only, now even 6 years, when the cars only last 5 years. So we are somewhere pretty far advanced. And when you consider that this is connected also with America spending more than it produces, consuming more than it produces, then you have to expect that this has to come to an end. And now you have a slowdown in housing. And housing has been in the last few years, the main source of additional credit, that $900 billion that I was speaking about. So I think that this, we are being tested now. And that's why I happen to be a little bit more cautious on this issue than most other people, exactly because of what you have said. That we must be reaching the limits of how far we can go in extending credit.
Mr. Soros, eu gostaria de saber a opinião do senhor a respeito dos movimentos que a gente assiste hoje em relação a favor da moeda de alguns países emergentes. O senhor acha que guarda alguma semelhança com os movimentos, os ataques especulativos da década de 90? O senhor foi até protagonista de algum desses casos, como no caso de 92 contra a Libra. Hoje o movimento é o inverso. Os ataques são a favor da moeda. Eu cito o caso específico do Brasil, que está sofrendo a sua moeda, uma das mais valorizadas do mundo em relação ao dólar. Eu queria saber se o senhor compara esse momento atual com a da década de 90 e como o senhor vê esse momento hoje na economia globalizada.
No, I think it's very different. I mean, there is perhaps now a tendency to overvalue currencies No, sorry, because that was the cause of the crash in 97. You have many more reserves now, so there is perhaps a tendency to over-accumulate reserves, which is not very efficient because you pay more for the money than you receive when you invest it in American Treasury bills. But that does not lead to a crash. So the kind of dislocation you had in 97 is unlikely to be repeated. You have something else that is going to perhaps go wrong sometime in the future, because so far we have not had financial markets without periodic crises. So I would expect that there will be crises in the future, but it's not going to be a repeat of the last one.
Mr. Soros, please. Até agora, nós colocamos bastante as nossas preocupações em relação aos mercados internacionais. Nesse momento, qual é a sua principal preocupação em relação ao cenário financeiro internacional?
No, I am actually much more concerned with the political scenery than I am with the financial and economic scenery. I mean, I expect that there will be dislocations. I look for them. I don't quite see them on the horizon this minute. But I see very serious dislocations in the political field, and that has been my main preoccupation now for the last few years. I think that the United States has been captured by a leadership that is led by a false ideology and has really misled the country. And the United States is a tremendously important country because it is the leader of the world. America sets the agenda for the world, and the rest of the world has to respond to it. So that actually is my major concern.
Nós vamos fazer um rápido intervalo, mas vamos voltar a falar dessas suas preocupações logo depois do nosso intervalo. No Roda Viva, que hoje tem na plateia Francisco da Silva Coelho, presidente da Ordem dos Economistas do Brasil, Lisa Helen, cônsul e diretora da seção de imprensa, educação e cultura do Consulado dos Estados Unidos em São Paulo, Ana Maria Tarrago, jornalista e empresária na área de comunicação corporativa, e José Antônio Ruggeri, editor de livros da Campus Elsevier. A gente volta já já. Você acompanha hoje no Roda Viva a entrevista com o investidor e empresário George Soros. Ele é autor de 9 livros, incluindo o mais recente, A Era da Insegurança, onde retrata as consequências da guerra contra o terrorismo.
Logo na introdução, George Soros faz uma análise sobre a sua situação no mundo, ao afirmar que, ao celebrar 75 anos recentemente, esta é uma boa época para fazer reflexões, já que teve uma vida plena e interessante e que há muito para relembrar. Nas 193 páginas de A Era da Insegurança, Soros analisa o que aconteceu após os atentados de 11 de setembro de 2001 nos Estados Unidos. A queda das Torres Gêmeas e o ataque ao Pentágono provocaram uma reação americana que, segundo Soros, fez com que o país perdesse o rumo. No livro, Soros acusa Bush de se aproveitar da situação para alavancar a sua reeleição e o culpa por ter colocado o país numa situação longe do equilíbrio ao promover a guerra contra o terror. Recentemente, Soros investiu uma fortuna em doações na tentativa de derrotar Bush nas urnas e tirá-lo do poder. O mega investidor diz que o declínio acentuado do poder e da influência americana deixou o mundo instável. No livro, Soros destaca que nos mercados financeiros entra sempre para ganhar. mas que na esfera social assume posições que acredita, ganhe ou não.
E o livro do senhor coloca um ponto de vista que me parece mais assemelhado àquele que é registrado no Fórum Social Mundial, um grande aglomerado de correntes de oposição, de ONGs, do que em Davos, por exemplo. E eu queria que o senhor explicasse por que é que o senhor considera que essa guerra contra o terrorismo não é, digamos assim, um bom negócio para o mundo.
I think that it has been misused by the Bush administration to gather support, get the public lined up behind the president by creating fear. And then the president used it to invade Iraq on false pretenses. Now, I think that everybody now knows that the invasion of Iraq was a terrible blunder. But I think we also need to understand that the war on terror as an idea is also a false metaphor that is very misleading, because you have to defend yourself against a terrorist, but waging war by its very nature creates innocent victims. And creating innocent victims then generates the rage and resentment which helps to support terrorism. So instead of getting rid of terrorists, we are actually breeding terrorists by waging war on terror the way President Bush has done. And there are other things that are wrong with it, because it has also been used to increase the power of the presidency and to undermine the very foundations of democracy in America, which is based on a division of powers between the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary. It has been used to suppress criticism, which is the foundation of an open society. So it has been an aberration that has done tremendous damage to America's place in the world, and it has done tremendous damage to the world because it has upset the world order.
Mr. Soros, eu queria voltar na última resposta do senhor no bloco anterior, quando o senhor disse que estava mais preocupado com a questão política hoje do que com a questão financeira. Mas parece que tem muita gente preocupada com a questão financeira hoje. O senhor acha que há uma preocupação exagerada dos analistas, da mídia, com a situação financeira internacional no momento?
Deixa eu pegar a sua carona, porque o próprio Alan Greenspan acabou de dar deu declarações nesse sentido, né? Preocupado, por exemplo, com a bolha na Bolsa da China e preocupado com esse crescimento do mundo durante muito tempo seguido, né?
Então, isso seria exagerado, na sua opinião, essa preocupação?
No, I think that there are concerns with financial markets always, because financial markets always lend themselves to bubbles and excesses of optimism, excesses of pessimism. So it's something that you should never forget about, and I think it's right to be concerned with. But I think that actually people generally have become a little bit too obsessed with economics and prosperity, and have forgotten some of the very foundations of our civilization, really, and the importance of being concerned with a healthy political life. There is really a spread of corruption, and I think a lot of people are disillusioned with democracy. And I have grown up and suffered from other totalitarian regimes. Mm-hmm. And I'm very worried that unless you are really concerned with defending the values of an open society, open society will not survive. And that is really my main concern.
Mr. Soros, o senhor propõe no livro a criação do que o senhor chamaria de D6, que seriam as 6 maiores democracias do mundo. Aí incluiria o Brasil, a China, o Brasil, a Índia, o México, a África do Sul, a Nigéria, falta um que eu não me lembro qual é. Eu queria saber qual seria a estrutura do D6 e como que ele poderia ser um interlocutor para o G8, né, que é mais ou menos o que parece que o senhor estava propondo no livro.
Yes. I think that there are certain issues on which all democracies have a common interest, namely preserving democracy and open society. And there, the developed world and the developing world, like Brazil, ought to work together and have a greater influence on the political scene. But there are other issues, mainly economic, where the interests are actually opposed. Mm-hmm. And there you need to negotiate, like in the Doha round. And so there, the developing democracies need to work together and engage in negotiations with the developed countries. That's the way I see it, that if there would be a common ground of democratic government, you could actually strengthen the values of an open society in the United Nations and also outside the United Nations, generally in world politics.
Mr. Soros, já que os jornalistas lhe fizeram perguntas sobre economia, eu, como economista, vou lhe fazer uma pergunta sobre meios de comunicação. Eu estou com um livrinho aqui que o senhor conhece, do seu professor Karl Popper, sobre a televisão. O senhor deve ter lido esse livro, sobre a televisão, né? Em que ele diz, o título, aliás, a televisão é um perigo para a democracia. Como é que o senhor, diante dos acontecimentos recentes, esse incidente na Venezuela, esse debate que está se travando nos Estados Unidos sobre os meios de comunicação e a democracia, eu sei que a sua inspiração é o livro do Popper, A Sociedade Aberta e Seus Inimigos, né? E a sua inspiração científica são os trabalhos do Popper sobre a busca do conhecimento, não é? A lógica da descoberta científica. Eu queria que o senhor falasse um pouco sobre democracia e meios de comunicação, que é um tema sobre o qual o senhor discorreu em alguns dos seus livros também.
Yes, I'm not familiar with this particular book by Popper. I must read it because...
I can give you.
Yeah, thank you. I will read it. But I think that we have run into a very serious problem with open society. Because basically Popper argued that we act on the basis of imperfect understanding and therefore we can't rely on a philosopher king. We need to have a democracy where there's free discussion, and that way we get closer to the truth, even though the absolute truth is not attainable. And that's a wonderful idea, and I have accepted that idea, and it has guided me all my life, really.
Of course.
So it's my idea also. But now I think we have to recognize something very important, and that is the Popper assumed, and he was not the only one. Ever since the Enlightenment, we have always assumed that reason seeks to understand reality, that the purpose of rational thought is to gain knowledge. And that, of course, is true in science, but it's not true in politics. because, you know, I developed this concept of reflexivity. And I said that there are two functions. There is the cognitive function, which is to understand the world, but there is also what I call the participating function, that is to change the world to suit your desires. Now, I've just now renamed this to the manipulative function, and then it becomes clearer that we can manipulate. And in politics, you can, in fact, manipulate the truth very successfully. We can see it done. And in fact, manipulation takes precedence over gaining knowledge. In science, yes. In politics, the debate, democratic debate, is not to understand the world better, but to get your vote and gain power and stay in power. And if for that reason you have to lie, cheat, or whatever, you will do it. And that's the weakness in an open society. So open society is now become very vulnerable because the techniques of deception have been refined. There is now, as a result of cognitive science, there are ways of appealing to people's emotions without people being aware of it, without it going through consciousness. And there are people who very consciously can use those techniques, and that leaves the public really exposed, almost defenseless. So this is a real problem. It's clearly visible in America. It's valid elsewhere as well. And how do we deal with that? That's because this really can undermine the open society. Now, we must therefore reaffirm our belief in the importance of reality, and we have to consciously reject the attempts to manipulate it. This has to be the reaction of the public to the attempts to manipulate. Only then can we defend ourselves against it. Now, why should we do that? Why should the public care? All you have to do in America is to look at the results of the war on terror, because it was the most successful attempt in manipulating public opinion. And Bush, in fact, got all the support he wanted. And yet, the results are disastrous. The results are the opposite of what he wanted to achieve. By his own standards, he wanted to demonstrate this, establish the superiority, the supremacy of America in the world. And instead of that, America's power and influence has fallen. So it didn't work. So unless you have respect for reality, the results you can manipulate, but your manipulations brings about something very different from what you were aiming at. So therefore, you have to realize that it's so important actually to go back to trying to understand reality. We have to learn that lesson. It's a difficult lesson. And that, I think, is where the media has a role to play, because the media is one of the institutions that keeps open society alive by exercising criticism. For about 18 months, we resigned that role because people were afraid of being considered unpatriotic. And look at the terrible results. So this is the time for us to reaffirm our belief that reason should give more attention to reality, even in politics. So that's the challenge. And
much more in politics. Much more in politics. Muito mais da política.
I'm sorry.
Muito mais na política do que na ciência. É importante que haja debate, né? Que haja discussão, que não haja unanimidade, que haja diversidade.
This is the problem of politics, you see, and scientists, social scientists, being scientists, somehow didn't realize that in politics, its reason is not aimed at understanding reality. It's aimed at convincing people and manipulating people. I didn't realize it. I accepted Popper's idea of open society, and I had this concept of reflexivity, but I still thought that the cognitive function has to take precedence over the manipulating function. It's really only in the last, really since I wrote my last book, that I realized that I made a mistake. I left this out of account, that the manipulating function is actually the dominant function in politics. And we have to protect against it if we want to maintain an open society.
Mr. Soros, sua posição ao presidente George Bush é muito bem reconhecido. E também o senhor apoia o Barack Obama como candidato nas próximas eleições americanas. Mas o senhor falou que o problema da política em geral é que está ficando muito manipulativo. O senhor acha que os democratas são menos manipulativos do que os republicanos? E também, o que o senhor espera que os democratas fazem para mudar o rumo dos Estados Unidos, que foi tomado pelos republicanos por 8 anos dele?
You know, since I believe in critical thinking, I'm also critical of the Democrats, because the Republicans were the first, not the Republicans, but the radical right, people like Karl Rove. They were the ones to discover that you can manipulate and how you can manipulate, and that they were more successful than the establishment. And that's how the radical right captured, actually, power. Now, everybody is trying to imitate them. So the Democrats are using the same techniques as the Republicans, and I think that's to some extent, of course, it's inevitable, but there has to be a difference. And I think we have to learn some lessons and change politics. Now, I think Barack Obama actually understands this, and he's not the only one. I think John Edwards has directly questioned the war on terror, which is a courageous thing to do. So I think there is an awakening. So I'm actually very optimistic that out of this terrible trouble, something very good is going to come, and that we will, in fact, reaffirm our belief in open society. But the Democrats are still afraid of their own shadow. And you can see it in some of their political behavior. I hope, however, that those Democrats who take a more a transformational view, I mean, Barack Obama wants to transform the political debate. It's a very ambitious task, but I think that the public may well respond to that, and that's where my hope is.
Ok, Sr. Soros, vamos fazer mais um rápido intervalo e voltamos em instantes com Roda Viva, aqui acompanhado na plateia por Carlos Dias, chefe de redação da equipe editorial da AmCham, Isabel Costa Carvalho, advogada especializada em mercado internacional de capitais e governança corporativa, José Luiz Godinho, empresário da área de educação, e Daniela Rocha, repórter da AmCham. A gente volta já já. O Roda Viva entrevista esta noite o bilionário George Soros. Ele nasceu na Hungria, estudou na Inglaterra, emigrou para os Estados Unidos e fez fortuna no mercado financeiro. Pergunta que eu faço agora é do empresário Jair Ribeiro da Silva Neto, que tem uma questão para o senhor. Vamos ver.
Boa noite, Sr. Soros. A minha pergunta é relativa às várias dezenas de milhões de dólares que o senhor doou para organizações para fomentar a democracia nos países da antiga União Soviética. Esses investimentos valeram a pena? o senhor colheu os resultados esperados inicialmente? O senhor teria feito alguma coisa diferente daquilo que o senhor fez no passado?
The investments were definitely worth it, and the results were not what I expected. They were, on the whole, let's say, Russia, where I spent several hundred millions of dollars, is turning into a new form of autocracy. I call it a petro-authoritarian sham democracy. So it didn't bring the results that I hoped for, but nevertheless, the investments were very worth it because when you stand up for certain principles, you don't do it in order to succeed. You do it because you believe in those principles, and therefore it's important to do it even if you don't succeed. And you know, it leaves some memories and people who have been, let's say, exposed to those ideas, people who have been educated, and therefore it will be the basis in the future for the development of an open society in Russia as well.
O senhor tem mencionado várias vezes se apresentado como um estadista sem Estado. No livro A Era da Insegurança, com a ajuda da minha equipe, eu contabilizei quantas vezes o senhor usou a palavra eu, ou derivadas dessa palavra, em 8 páginas do prefácio, e registramos 176 vezes. O senhor acha que esse protagonismo, e claro que do senhor é bastante eficiente na medida em que tem condição de ter essa presença mundial, ele pode transformar a sociedade ou as transformações se dão por decisões coletivas e ações de grandes grupos?
No, obviously, you know, one man doesn't make much difference in the end. And the effect that I've had has been mainly by supporting people in various countries who stood up for those principles. So I gave them some support. And when you put it all together, I think it is making some difference. And there are areas where really improvements are brought about.
For example?
I give you one example now. You know, there is the resource curse. That is to say, there are countries that are rich in natural resources, but the people are just as poor as in countries that are less well endowed because of bad government, because of corruption, because of civil war very often, and so on. So what can you do about it? This has been historically the case. In Africa, when you look, you know, Sudan, Angola, and so on. Actually, you can do something first by transparency. That is to say, establish where the monies are coming from and where they are going, and then holding the governments up to certain standards of behavior. And that has turned into a movement. It started, there was a campaign started in 2003, Publish What You Pay. And that then developed, and a lot of progress has been made in countries like Nigeria, which has been traditionally very corrupt. They actually published what monies they receive, and then the public could ask, where did the money go? And several governors were impeached. So that's an example of where positive change has been brought about. And basically, where I've had some impact has been in backing people who wanted to accomplish something, giving them additional resources for doing it.
Sr. Soros, eu, lendo algumas das suas declarações sobre política brasileira, especialmente nas eleições, nas vésperas das eleições presidenciais de 2002, fiquei preocupado com o futuro político de Barack Obama lá nos Estados Unidos, porque o senhor previu que o José Serra ganharia as eleições, não haveria outra maneira de se fazer. E o senhor previu também que com Lula haveria uma crise, que se eu fosse investidor no Brasil e ouvisse as suas palavras, sairia correndo daqui para nunca mais voltar. O senhor previu quase que o caos financeiro com a eleição do Lula. Bom,
I hate to tell you, but I was misreported. That was a case where my remarks were used in a way that not accurately. I did not say those things. That's just for the record.
Ok. O que parece é que o senhor usou nessas análises a sabedoria convencional. A sabedoria convencional, pelo menos para as finanças, é uma boa ideia, é um bom método para se ganhar dinheiro. Para a política não funciona, mas para as finanças é melhor?
Actually, in finance, people believe in being a contrarian. But actually, I only believe in being a contrarian when the trend is about to change. Most of the time, it doesn't pay to be a contrarian. So you have to mix it up a little bit. Okay. You have to actually accept the trend and then try to guess when it may be changing.
Okay. Sônia.
Sr. Soros, o senhor estava colocando aqui a sua aversão à manipulação na área política. O senhor comentou aqui também um pouco sobre a sua decepção com os investimentos que fez na Rússia, mesmo dizendo que não voltaria atrás. Eu quero dizer o seguinte, lhe perguntar o seguinte, o que o senhor acha da natureza humana? O senhor acha que essa manipulação, esse tipo de movimento é uma novidade na história da humanidade? E como o senhor acha que como é que isso pode ser mudado? É com a razão? É com a cognitividade? Como é que a gente muda isso?
I think that human nature is imperfect. And, the division into good and bad and the debate whether we are intrinsically good or intrinsically bad is a false debate. Yeah. There's a mixture of all those things in all of us. And I think that actually cannot be changed. In other words, you can make some progress in understanding the world better, but you will never be able to reach perfection. And that's the one thing we have to learn, that perfection is not attainable. At the same time, getting closer, improving our understanding, it makes all the difference.
A transparência sobre as imperfeições, então, permite uma evolução. É isso o que o senhor defende? É uma transparência.
Yes. You see, if you take the Enlightenment, you see, I've just pointed out a fallacy in the Enlightenment. But doesn't that speak for the Enlightenment? That because you use your reason, you can actually discover that there was a fallacy in the Enlightenment. So the very discovery of the Enlightenment fallacy is, in some ways, progress. So it's an achievement. So exactly because we are imperfect, we are capable of infinite improvement. And that actually, to my mind, is actually even preferable to being perfect. I think it may be rather boring to live in a perfect world with perfect people. So I think this is life.
This is life. Mr. Soros, por favor, o senhor tem feito uma defesa forte da sociedade aberta, e nessa luta contra a autocracia política. Agora, como é possível conciliar essa sociedade aberta com uma crítica ao capitalismo que o senhor estaria fazendo nesse momento? Que tipo de capitalismo seria compatível ou de sistema econômico com essa sociedade aberta?
I think capitalism is very compatible, more compatible than a state-run economy. But it has to hold itself open to improvement. In other words, markets are very, very efficient in allocating resources between competing means. But they are not perfect. And just because central planning has failed, communism has failed, it doesn't mean that the free markets are perfect. Mm-hmm. That's the error that the market fundamentalists have made. So yes, we must use markets, but we must also recognize that markets, while they are there to take care of individual needs, are not designed to take care of collective needs. Markets are amoral, yet we also need morality. Markets are, for instance, not designed to maintain stability of the markets. Markets are not even designed to maintain competition. If you allow competition totally free hand, you will find, as Marx was right on this, that you may find everything concentrated in one hand. So you actually have to protect the market from excessive concentration of powers. So there is a room for politics, and markets can't do it alone. So that's, I think, and that's where I probably differ from the World Social Forum, who somehow perhaps want to abolish capitalism, abolish globalization. I'm actually a believer in globalization. I think it has brought benefits, it has created problems, and I think we should address the problems and make globalization work better.
Guilherme. Sr. Soros, o senhor que é um defensor da sociedade aberta, como o senhor vê a política do presidente Bush para os países, em relação aos países da América Latina, especificamente ao Brasil? No momento que a gente vê várias democracias, vários países da América Latina se afastando um pouco da democracia, não seria melhor para os Estados Unidos se aproximar mais, abrir mais as portas para os produtos brasileiros do que praticar essa política protecionista que os Estados Unidos vem praticando já há algum tempo em relação aos países da América Latina, em relação ao Brasil especificamente?
Yes, it would be better, but right now America has been greatly weakened, and it isn't in the strong position where it can be sort of far-sighted and let's say try to combat the threat posed by Chavez, which is I think a very real threat, by being more even-handed or generous. So I'm afraid America doesn't live up to either your expectations or mine. That's unfortunately the case.
Alastair.
Mr. Soros. Voltando sobre o assunto da economia, os Estados Unidos e China estão desenvolvendo uma parceria muito interessante em termos da China financiando o consumo americano e os americanos estimulando a produção chinesa. Você acha que essa situação está sustentável no longo prazo? Como que você vê essa situação?
It is sustainable, but it is also very dangerous because basically there is a symbiotic relationship. America, mature economy, people like to live well, they like to consume more than they produce, they like to take more and more credit. And China after all, an authoritarian regime, wants to acquire power and likes to see the people work more and consume less, so that there is something left over for acquiring power, because basically wealth is power. So China is getting richer in a way, and America is getting poorer, and which means that China is rising as a power. And that poses a great challenge for the world, because when you have a new power rising, in the end, the established power tends to resist losing power. And this is how we had the First World War, because Germany was rising. So there is a danger that this process will eventually lead to confrontation, unless you can somehow co-opt China into a world order which allows the rise of China. And that requires a stronger, better functioning world order. And unfortunately, we have now suffered a setback with the Bush administration. We'll have to reconstitute the world order. But I think it's very important to accept China as a rising power and give them scope to rise, expect them to follow certain standards of behavior that makes them acceptable as a rising power. That is a really a big challenge that's facing us. And you can see it happening in Africa, because China is now entering Africa. And it's, in some ways, is making the same mistakes as the previous colonial powers. See? Now, at the same time, interestingly, the colonial powers have learned from their past mistakes and now trying to correct those mistakes in Africa. Now, China could join the West and actually work on reducing poverty in Africa. They are not doing it. So it's an interesting thing, but they could be co-opted. It would be in their interest, it would be in our interest, and it would be, of course, in Africa's
Mr.
interest.
Soros, eu lendo o seu livro aqui, o senhor fala bastante da sua tese das situações distantes do equilíbrio. Então, me parece que ele permeia todo o livro. E uma das questões que me chama a atenção, e eu tenho curiosidade, é de saber como que foi a operação em que ficou conhecida como a quebra do Banco da Inglaterra. Quer dizer, foi uma situação absolutamente distante do equilíbrio. E como é que foi perceber que ali havia a possibilidade de ganhar o volume de dinheiro que o senhor ganhou, e como que ela se deu em termos de estruturação, a operação financeira ali daquele momento?
Well, see, if you have this theory, then you always look for examples that fit the theory. You know, there's a saying that economists have predicted the 8 of the last 3 recessions, because they always look for recessions, right? So I always look for far equilibrium situations. And sometimes I find them, and sometimes I make a mistake. And here I found it.
Beluso.
Mr. Soros, eu tenho uma queixa a fazer ao senhor, que o senhor não montou um ataque especulativo contra o real nos anos 90. Nós poderíamos ter escapado antes, né, da supervalorização do real. Lamento que o senhor não tenha feito esse ataque. Eu estava na Inglaterra quando o senhor executou a Libra, né, e fez com que os ingleses baixassem a taxa de juros e a economia começou a crescer. É verdade?
Well, yes, but you know, when I engage in financial speculation, it is not to benefit the country. Neither to hurt it, nor to benefit it.
Eu estou brincando,
It's just to make a...
Não, e a outra coisa que eu queria lhe perguntar agora seriamente é como é que o senhor vê a relação entre mercado e Estado na China, quer dizer, o modelo chinês, né, na sua surpreendente especificidade.
Well, it has been working rather well because the central direction, the way it was done, really allowed a very dramatic and very fast rate of growth. And actually, the state apparatus attracted the best talents in China, just as Japan did in the earlier...
Coreia, também a Coreia. Coreia também.
Yes, Korea maybe less so, but certainly Japan did, and China. But unfortunate, and there was also a tendency to follow the economic progress with political liberalization. And unfortunately, this tendency came to an end. And more recently, there has been a sort of a tightening of on the freedom of speech, on the media, and so on. And that, I think, has the seeds of a serious problem. That if and when there is going to be a capitalist crisis, it will sweep away the government, because they have not built the mechanisms where discontent can express itself. So you now have very large numbers of quite violent protests on very small scale going on, which are actually repressed. And if and when economic conditions deteriorate, then you could have social unrest. That is a danger, and when I had a reconciliation in a way with the Chinese authorities in 2001, they invited me to give a speech. This is what I said to them, that they should use this economic prosperity for introducing a more open society, freedom of speech, etc.
Vamos fazer mais um rápido intervalo e voltamos dentro de instantes com a entrevista de hoje, acompanhada na plateia por Alexa Salomão, jornalista da revista Exame, Sérgio Moreira Salles, presidente da SAL Participações, Fernanda Bueno Ferraz, economista, e Alencar Costa, empresário. Nós voltamos já já. Estamos de volta com o último bloco do programa Roda Viva de hoje, que entrevista o mega investidor George Soros. Na lista da revista Forbes de homens mais ricos do mundo, ele ocupa a posição de número 80, atualmente com 8 bilhões e meio de dólares nas contas bancárias. A coordenadora de Relações Internacionais da Escola de Direito da Fundação Getúlio Vargas, Maria Lúcia Pádua Lima, tem uma pergunta para o senhor. Vamos ver.
No Brasil, como em vários países emergentes, há uma grande discussão a respeito de quais seriam as garantias de imunidade a crises financeiras. Para tanto, sempre se inclui várias condições, como solvência externa, disciplina fiscal, controle de inflação, etc. Eu gostaria de saber se o senhor mantém a sua opinião, a sua descrença em relação a métodos quantitativos científicos que pretendem lidar com as crises financeiras, afastar as crises financeiras, impedir que elas ocorram. Desta forma, gostaria de saber se o senhor mantém a sua opinião que, dada a descontinuidade do mercado, é impossível prever e afastar a possibilidade de crises financeiras, mesmo que o país faça a lição de casa mais bem feita possível.
I think that there's an awful lot that we can learn about markets, watching the markets, taking account of instabilities that may be developing, for instance, monitoring the accumulation of reserves, the central banks or let's say, monitoring the growth of private equity, takeovers, and the increase in leverage that they may bring about. And then you can actually take some steps that may well prevent a crisis from developing. However, your ability to understand what's going on is likely to be always lagging behind what actually is going on, and therefore there's always the possibility of a breakdown. There is no regularity about it, no predictability about it. So I think just because you do have crises from time to time doesn't mean that you should abandon the effort to try to prevent them.
Quer dizer, em poucas palavras, brincando aqui com o Beluso, que é o único economista presente, o senhor acha que os economistas servem para alguma coisa, mas não para todas?
Talvez para
they are like all human beings, you know, imperfect. But it doesn't mean that they have no contribution to make. On the contrary, we have really learned a lot, and you couldn't have as sophisticated markets as you do, and you couldn't have gone as far as you have in extending credit unless you had developed better methods.
Sr. Soros, a movimentação hoje dos hedge funds, ela é pesada. E ela pode, vamos dizer, independente dos fundamentos de uma economia, realmente provocar tumultos. A saída de um hedge fund de um país um pouco menor, seja pelo motivo que for, provoca um estrago. O senhor é a favor de algum controle sobre a movimentação desses fundos gigantes que, independente dos fundamentos da economia, eles fazem as decisões a partir dos seus próprios fundamentos e não dos fundamentos do país? Como controlar isso para causar o menor dano possível ao país em questão?
I am actually in favor of both supervising and controlling markets to prevent extremes from developing.
Mas como?
However, yeah, the way to do it, I don't think, is to select some scapegoat, like, let's say, hedge funds, but, for instance, controlling the flow of credit, because basically hedge funds use credit. And if you control in some ways, or monitor credit first, and then, if necessary, control it, then I think you do the right thing. I think to select hedge funds as such is sort of like finding a scapegoat. Hedge funds operate within an institutional setting. For instance, my hedge fund reports to the authorities their positions so the authorities can monitor it. But in principle, I am in favor of supervision and regulation.
Sr. Soros, então vou fazer uma pergunta um pouco mais específica. Por exemplo, vamos dizer que há um fundo posicionado em papéis da Rússia. Esse mesmo fundo estaria posicionado em papéis do Brasil. Acontece alguma coisa na Rússia, ele se livra dos papéis deles aqui no Brasil, sem motivo nenhum, sem uma mudança no fundamento aqui. Então, nesse tipo de movimento, que é um movimento micro do fundo, é uma razão micro que ele age no campo macro. Como impedir isso? Como, vamos dizer, não impedir, mas pelo menos equilibrar um pouco essa movimentação?
But this has happened, and I think it's going to happen again, because there is something called the carry trade. You borrow money in Japan at practically zero interest, and you buy Brazilian bonds, because they yield now 12.5%. And actually the Brazilian currency tends to appreciate, so it's a fabulous business. And I'm sure that there are very large positions borrowing in Japan and invest in holding Brazilian bonds. I don't know the amounts, but the authorities probably know it. It's not only hedge funds, it's also done by banks, probably on an even larger scale. That's one of the potential trouble spots in the world financial system. It needs careful monitoring, and I also think that interest rates in Brazil are too high. They should be lower. It will make it less.
O senhor acha que esse fluxo de dinheiro que entra no Brasil se deve muito aos juros, basicamente aos juros altos do país, ou também aos fundamentos do país? Como, e também estendendo a pergunta, como o senhor vê hoje o governo Lula no país?
I think it's due to the margin between borrowing in Japan and earning interest in Brazil. It's basically what they call a no-brainer, right? But if too many people do it, and then there is a change, and let's say it's not that there's any change in Brazil, but Japan raises interest rates. You then get a dislocation, and you'll have little mini shocks. And you already had a mini shock this year. I don't know whether it affected Brazil, but for instance, it affected India. So this is now a part of the financial markets that the authorities have to watch very, very carefully.
De 0 a 5, que nota o senhor daria hoje para a política econômica brasileira no governo Lula?
I wouldn't like to, because, you know, I come here, I haven't paid attention to Brazil. I think things look really pretty good superficially. I can see that interest rates maybe are too high. Central bank could have been more aggressive reducing interest rates. I think that there is a great need for structural reforms, but exactly what kind of structural reforms I'm not sufficiently aware. So I wouldn't want to say it. On the whole, Brazil is in a very good state, and I think it could really grow faster than it is growing, and also reduce the differential between rich and poor faster than it is doing.
O senhor foi generoso ao não querer dar nota para a política econômica brasileira, particularmente para a política monetária, mas o Banco Central do Brasil daria nota 0 para o senhor por causa das suas opiniões. O que eu queria perguntar é o seguinte, se o senhor não entende que essa alavancagem excessiva, esse excesso de crédito, né, ele não decorre, paradoxalmente, da forma como os bancos centrais e os tesouros fizeram intervenções nas crises, quer dizer, criando uma espécie de moral hazard, quer dizer, de falta de prudência, não é? Moral hazard estrutural na economia global, que isso deu origem a esses ciclos de liquidez abundantes, porque, na verdade, as perdas são muito restritas, não é? São muito pequenas quando ocorre a crise para os agentes financeiros.
Yes, I think there's an element of that. Moral hazard is a serious consideration. And there's a saying that if you are large enough, you cannot fail, because the central banks can't allow you to fail. Therefore, they have to somehow control you through other means. And the situation is so complicated that the central banks recognize they can't really do it, so they rely on the bank's own risk control mechanisms. But I think the liquidity is actually not, generated right now when central banks intervene to stop their currencies from rising too much. When China buys, $1 billion at the Central Bank of China every day. That's what's creating, in my opinion, the liquidity, the excess liquidity in the world market.
O Japão também. Japão também, para defender o ien.
Yes, it's happening in Japan, and there is really a lopsided global financial market, because you've got the euro that actually does fluctuate freely, and you've got renminbi and the yen, which doesn't, and also the Korean won. So you've got a large part of the world is tied to the dollar, and another part is separated, and that does not allow the kind of currency adjustments that ought to occur to bring things into better balance. That is a source of potential trouble.
Sr. Soros, nosso tempo acabou. Eu vou fazer uma última pergunta que com certeza poderia gerar um programa inteiro, mas que eu acho que eu tenho que fazer, que é a seguinte: o que é que levou o senhor a buscar ganhar tanto dinheiro ao longo da vida?
I didn't really want to. I was searching for the truth, and I found money.
Bom, eu espero que aqui a gente tenha ido buscar o dinheiro e tenha encontrado um pouco de verdade. Obrigado pela sua entrevista, aos nossos entrevistadores, a você que está em casa. Estaremos aqui às 10h40 da noite, na próxima segunda-feira, com mais um Roda Viva. Uma ótima semana e até lá.
Thank you.